Hey everybody, Dave from Dave Moore Racing here. I am with the legendary Kevin Jiggett, and we're going to talk about the six spring clutch for the 250R. Kevin, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Dave?
Good,
Thanks for
buddy.
having me on your videos. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I'm getting tons and tons of questions about when is the clutch coming out? What's special about the clutch? So let's hit on a little bit of the history and then just go from there.
Okay. Well, the original slingshot came about from the need for my turbo saber that I built. The the turbo saber is capable of producing upwards of 97 foot-pounds of torque. So if you can imagine trying to hold that with only 5 discs, you can see how thin they are. So we had to load it up really heavy. Even to hold that kind of power, we had to load the clutch up and the slingshot with a lot of weight and a lot of springs. And so that, you know how that is when you got
Yeah.
400 pounds of clutch pull, it's it's impossible to
Yeah, you
pull for very long.
Get the Popeye
Yeah,
arm thing going.
and then it ends up breaking the clutch cable.
Yep.
Usually, I think is what happened on mine.
Yep.
And then it still wouldn't hold. I think I tried higher boost settings and it still wouldn't hold. So that me and you got to talking. It's like, hey, why don't we do away with the 5 springs that the Honda has and go with 6 springs like everybody else? That way you can, like you had talked about, you can balance your springs. You
Right,
could do a three
exactly.
or two or one or whatever. Yeah. And so I had a customer send me an eight, I believe it's the 82 Honda
Yes.
ATC clutch possibly, and it had 6 spring clutch. So, so I was saying, hey, they already did it, you know.
Right.
So we
Right.
basically just copied that bolt pattern. We're using the bolt pattern off the older Honda, and went with 6 springs instead of 5. But we can also go with a little bit wider and stack more plates. We're able to get a 9 disc clutch on there instead of 8 or 5. In case of the slingshot, it was only down to 5 disc
Right.
because you had to remove 2 to fit it in there. But with your new side cover, we're able to do um, a full 8 or 9 disc setup and a slingshot also, basically.
And keep it all underneath the cover.
Right, and keep it under the cover. Yeah. Now you can use you do have to use extended
Kick.
cover, I believe, to fit down,
Yeah.
or a spacer.
Yeah. Actually, the
Yeah,
spacer. Let me see if I can find a spacer.
yeah, you have a spacer.
That right there.
Yeah,
Aluminum
that right there.
spacer goes underneath the already established cap, and all you've got to
Yep.
do is have the 200 thousandths longer
Right.
Kickstarter shaft, and then it's all underneath there.
Right.
Very
Yep.
simple, very easy.
Yeah, it makes it real easy to fit it under there and not have to, really long Kickstarter and extended cover and all of that stuff.
Exactly. So hit on some of the reasons why the design changes were made to make it last way longer than any of the conventional clutch setups are.
Right. Well, one of the ideas that I liked was I had built a slingshot for the KTM quads, and they used these hardened steel pins to drive the clutch plates because one of the problems with the standard clutch aluminum clutch plates is you can see the grooving in
Right.
there, and this one has it. So the thin steels tend to groove in there, and then when you go with a thin steel or even a thinner yet, like these are 040s or this is an 045, they tend to even cut in there even more.
Right.
But when you put them on a steel hardened pin, it eliminates that wear that you get on the clutch hub. Plus, you can replace them if they do wear.
Right.
You just pop them out. They're floating pins, and they'll basically just float in there once it's running. And then the other thing that I did, that's real annoying. I think I have one here, but you strip out the spring boss
Yes.
post,
Or snap
or
it
break
and
it.
snap it
Yeah,
completely off.
these are notorious for snapping off. I
Hmm.
think I have one or two. I even have one that I think they tried to weld up, and try to repair it.
Right.
But so, and one of my ideas was always to just press in the spring post, and basically then you have a total bulletproof, clutch that you can replace the spring post if you damage them. But they're, roll form threads, and they're way stronger than stock stuff
Oh yeah,
anyways. The
I went high enough on pressure on one of those to break on one of the spare clutches that we did to break the bolt off in the tower without damaging the tower, and then just screw
Yeah,
it back out.
exactly. Right. And that's another thing is we're using all of the clutches will come with Torx head bolts instead of
Yeah.
regular. You get it's tired of stripping out the little hex head, so the Torx are much better at resistance to being stripped out. So that gives you another advantage. And then the other thing is we'll have some options with the spring spacer, so you can run 2 or 3 different heights of spacers,
Right.
and that will affect your preload basically on your spring. And then we'll have some spring options too. I've got a couple different options of springs, a light and a stiff spring. So
So the guys that are running them on my team that have them, and we've set them up so they have just enough holding power to stand up to the style of racing, which is XC, and the amount of torque that's being made by the engine. Absolutely love them because you don't have to have any more holding pressure than what it's going to take to survive that.
yeah,
Instead of what we have right now, it's like, okay, well, you're going to jump from this amount of spring pressure up to this amount of spring pressure, and now you're way over the threshold, and you're back to the arm pump thing again.
yeah, start getting arm pump every time you clutch it coming out of return or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I did when I was doing my testing. I actually have a clutch dyno, you might call it,
Yes.
where I can test the torque, the static breakover torque of the clutch. And it starts out, it's being how you've got the extra disc, you're already 20% higher than stock.
Right.
And then when you start adding the extra pressure, you can gain, considerable amount. I've actually tested it all the way, a stock clutch, no lockup, I've tested all the way to nearly 100 foot-pounds of torque before it'll break
That
loose.
makes that better
So,
holding than what the slingshot was
yeah,
on the 5 plate. So
right.
so I'm
This setup with a
guessing
5 plate with with
tungsten.
with 5 springs, the stiffest springs I could pull with a clutch cable, which is about 480 pounds or something. That clutch
Mm-hmm.
pull, 97, 98 foot-pounds of torque was it. And I've already tested this with only 300 pounds of spring. I've tested it 82 foot-pounds of torque with no lockup
That's
on my Saber.
so.
And I've tested it on the bench or on my little clutch dyno to upwards of 100 with somewhere around, 350 pounds of clutch spring pressure or something like that, which is still
Yeah.
within range.
So the
You know,
thing is this clutch can potentially can potentially occupy a spot that was only occupiable before by either like the arm style lockup or the slingshot lockup, meaning that if you were to make more power than that, now that's even covered up to way higher torque numbers that we
yeah,
probably would just crush transmissions. I mean, it's
right.
that one clutch right there. Not only is it have better tunability than anything that's on the market, it has better reliability than anything on the market, but it also has better flexibility than anything on the market.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've got different options. We'll have some different thicknesses of steel. We'll have like some little 20 shims that you could set your stack height with. to play with clearances, for drag racing or whatever,
Yeah.
A lot of times you just need to play with your stack height to get your spacing right or your preload right, things like that.
Right.
Another option to do these first ones, I think you have ran them that way, but they'll have a the first ones we're not using this batch we're not using a steel first, but the later ones will be able to use a steel or even just a really thin neck plate or something like this as the first plate. So that prevents you from wearing the back surface.
Your aluminum pressure.
Right. And it also from my testing, what I found is the steel or the tie plate has a lot higher coefficient of friction than the aluminum surface.
Yes.
So you actually get a small bump in torque handling, like something like a 5% gain, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
More than I expected.
So let me ask you this. How did you cure the problem of all this stack height adjustment if the rod is static length?
Which rod? What rod are you talking about?
The push rod is static length, and as we're changing our stack height, then the push rod has to be adjustable.
Right. So every time you change stock right, you got to your push rod is now out of adjustment. I know this guy. This guy's named Dave Moore. And he makes this really cool push rod adjuster that will come with these clutches. Yeah.
So it comes with the clutch.
Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah. So I don't actually have one. I think it's in my bike right now. The adjustable. So yeah, that's another thing. All these clutches will come with an adjustable clutch push rod.
Because when we were talking about this, that was going to be one of the biggest problems was if we're going to make this all adjustable, right? It's going to have this adjustability and flexibility. So that is why I was like, okay, screw it. We need this. Everybody needs it anyways. And this product is going to need it. This product is going to hinge on the ability to be able to adjust.
To adjust it, yeah. Because if you throw in even say this little 15,000, 20,000 shim, your clutch adjustment's completely out of whack. And that's one reason why you can, adjust the clutch stack height is to be able to set your preload. But now we've got it the other way around. Now we can adjust our stack height for whatever we want for spring pressure or just wear or whatever. And now we can adjust the clutch free play with your adjuster, and that solves that problem.
And then the whole thing now is a complete package. So here's the thing that everybody wants to know. How much and when can they start buying them?
Right. So what we're waiting on now is we're just waiting on a few parts to come in. I have a first batch of 10 that we'll have available. Should be probably within, I'm guessing within this week, maybe 2 weeks at the most.
Mm-hmm.
We will have it ready. And they'll basically come with everything but fibers. So you'll get springs and spacers and steels and all the components that you need to make it work. You just add your own fibers to it. So I believe it's $780 is the retail price, I think is what we had talked about.
Yes.
And that's basically complete. And the other thing that I do, and I've always done on my slingshots, is I provide a lifetime warranty. And that's something you don't ever hear of in this industry. Yeah. And I told the guy the other day, he had an old slingshot from probably 15 years ago. And he said, yeah, I'm still running it. And I said, well, if it ever does wear out or you break something, just send it back and I'll replace it. So that's what I decided to even do on these clutches because, component wise, you can replace small parts relatively easy. And sometimes it's a hassle for the consumer to, try to find parts to replace it or just buy a whole new clutch. They don't want to drop another $700 on a new clutch when you can just repair something simple like a spring post or the pins or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So what is going to be the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I would say the best way is either through my email, which is gpracerx and then the number 85 at gmail.com,
Mm-hmm.
or at my, that's probably the best way. And then the other way would be through my Facebook page, either GP Engineering or Kevin Jiggett Facebook page. Either one of those is a good way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I
So
mean,
we're looking at
this
a
should
couple weeks,
answer.
hopefully.
Yeah, this should answer everybody's question about what the clutches are and when they're coming. And I'm going to tell you guys, we've been running them on the XC bikes, and I wouldn't take them out. The guys wouldn't want to get rid of them. And we've got all the builds that we're doing next year. Everybody's going to get one. So, you know, that's that's mine. That's my contribution to the thing is that, and I'm not, people always think that I do this because I'm getting some sort of a kickback, but Kevin's sitting right there. I'm not making any money off of this. Matter of fact, I gave Kevin the design for the adjuster, so he's going to make those in house for it. So, I mean, when I say that this is a good product, that's because I run it on all of my stuff. So,
yeah. And that's one reason I wanted to give it to you, is because you could torture test it on the cross country.
oh yeah,
Drag race, you might run for a few seconds and they just don't get a lot of wear other than the initial launch.
no. Those guys that
like
ride
that.
for me are assholes. I mean, they're really good testers,
Yeah.
very good testers. So
Right.
if something's going to get break, my team will break it.
They'll break it, yep. And then the other thing that I'm in the process of doing now is finding the limit of what it will hold up on my turbo saber tooth. So we will see. But so far, I've already tested over 80 foot-pounds of torque, which is pretty phenomenal for a
That's crazy.
spring clutch. Yeah. So
Well,
we'll see.
All right, awesome. Well,
thank
you, Kevin. And we need to get back together for some more two-stroke smoking and joking.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
Yep. See ya.